folks. Here we go.
I'll just go ahead.
Yeah, graphics 2 is going to be up. Okay. Can you go to the first view just like that? No music.
Alright guys, mic check. Okay, Ricky, mic.
Yep, I am ready.
Willie, mic check.
Yep, let's go.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're live.
Okay, and go for it, guys.
Hey guys, it's 8 o'clock. I'm not sure if there is some music playing or not. Let me know if we have some music in the background or not. I'm not sure if we did or not, but
I turned the volume all the way down. Yes.
Okay, so anyway, hey, it's 8 o'clock Eastern time. It's 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Canal Zone time. It is happy hour at the Balboa Yacht Club. Ricky, happy Friday, man.
Happy Friday to everybody. Thank you once again for joining us. As you guys both and everybody know, both of us born and raised in the Canal Zone, Willie Benioff and me, Ricky Royal. We're glad to bring you this show every Friday. Basically, the first week of the month is Canal Zone History Month. So tonight we've got an incredible show lined up for you guys with our very own Dave Dahlstrom. You know, Willie, we're going to be learning some stuff tonight that you guys have probably have no idea of, such as nuclear explosions and the reason behind these three incredible Canal Zone towns, Margarita. We're going to find out why that was built, Cocoli, and Diablo Heights. Yeah. So, everybody, thank you for joining us at the happy hour at the Balboa Yacht Club, an SCN Canal Zone production, which is a show that's all about the Panama Canal, guys. Its history, its traditions, its towns, its people, as we like to refer to them as Zonians, or as all the slim and shorty people call them, mango heads.
That's right.
All right, guys, so let's get this show started. We do have a great show lined up, and like always, Willie will be interviewing our very own David. So cheers to everybody. Enjoy our show.
Yeah, salute, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
No, listen, we got a lot going on. It is a jam-packed full day of just all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, it's, if nothing else, outside of our show stuff, but the reason why I'm wearing my Panama shirt, apart from the fact that we're, SCN Canal Zone in Panama and all that good stuff, is that today FIFA announced their lottery winners for tickets to the World Cup. You had to put in for it in December. They had over 150 million applications for tickets. And I put in for my 2 tickets for myself and my son to go to the games. And I actually had I'd remembered it a couple of days ago, but then I sort of kind of forgot about it. And then about 3:30 or 4:30 this afternoon, I was like, oh, let me check my email again. And there was an email from FIFA. And so I opened it up, and lo and behold,
one of them.
There
Wow,
it was.
right
I was selected to go. I got tickets to the Croatia game. England was my first choice, Panama, England, but I got Croatia, which probably was my second choice. So that should be a lot of fun. That's going to be in Toronto the 23rd of June.
Yes. And those in Panama, they added 40 additional flights.
They did indeed.
To get you guys up to Canada. And I'm not sure, but I think they waived the visa as well.
They're doing some of that. And again, it is for Canada. They have the first 2 games are in Canada on the 14th and on the 23rd. I think that's what the dates are. And then, no, actually, it's the 17th and the 23rd. And then the 27th, it's in New York and New Jersey at East Rutherford, where the Giants and the Jets play.
Really, a little bochincha. Right now, United States and Panama are negotiating or finalizing the deal where Panamanians can just get into the U.S. with no visas required.
Correct. So, yes. So a lot to cheer about for sure. It's definitely a great day. And again, having being selected for that was a really, really big deal. I know a lot of people were waiting on that, hoping that they were selected. There
You
is
just
still
gotta
that
bear it.
opportunity. It's just, you just gotta you guys gonna be one of the lucky ones. So, but yeah, I'm excited for that because that's going to be really cool. But a lot of other things going on here. A couple of quick announcements, and then we'll get our historian Dave Dahlstrom on. It is again, like Ricky said, the first Monday or first Friday of the month, and that's when we have Dave joining us and
I
giving
did
us
say
some.
Monday.
Yeah,
No, I think I
you
said
did.
first week.
Well,
I think I said first week of
you
the
probably
month.
did. Yeah, I think that was me. But nonetheless, let's say hello to a couple of folks here. Vern, how you doing? Good to see you. Happy Friday to you. Hope you're not on the road this time. Maybe you're sitting in some somewhere warm and cozy. But anyhow, yeah, let's do a couple of quick announcements and then we'll move right along because Dave's got a jam-packed full show for us, guys. Like Ricky said, there's some really cool things with the canal, things that they were talking about doing and looking at, and then figure out how we got the margaritas and coquelites and all
The
that
third
stuff.
set of locks, guys. The third set of locks, which
Yeah.
we're gonna get really informed tonight on that.
Yeah. So that should be good. But let's cover a couple other things here. A couple of quick announcements before we move along there.
SCN Television presents K-Pasa. And now here's this evening's host, Army Sergeant Bob Foster.
Good evening and welcome to K Plaza. We've got two guests tonight. First Sergeant First Class Jim Webb.
There we go. So we'll just wind that down. I need to put a better fade on that or something, or change our names on there. But so quick couple of things happening here. Again, the Canal Zone reunion in Panama is now over. So we're shifting gears to Canal Zone reunion or Pan Canal Society reunion, I guess what you want to call it, in Orlando. And that's going to be it's actually the second week in July this year, guys. It's not 4th of July weekend. It's the week after. So
I kind of like that. I think that's a great thing.
it's probably a lot easier on travel. Okay. Especially being that it's in Orlando and that's a
absolutely.
vacation destination,
That's a good point because the prices are the highest. Like me, I always go last minute, and they're always high because it's a 4th of July weekend.
Well, I think even if you book it out in advance, it's going to be high simply because it is 4th of July weekend. It's a heavy travel weekend. You're going to the vacation capital of America almost. So it does make it a bit tough there. So it is a week later. So don't forget about that. Also, don't forget coming up in March here and go to pancanalsociety.org. That's where you get it, the Pan Canal's website. Not this month, but next month, because we're in February now, but in March, the Canal Zone, the library museum library collection in Gainesville is having their luncheon. So make sure you sign up for that, guys. It's a great opportunity to support that great organization. They really are probably front and center who's spearheading, keeping this whole Canal Zone memory alive, and the collection there is incredible. The digital collection is amazing with all the spillway and yearbooks and everything else. But then if they have a physical collection as well that you can go see. So, if you're in Florida or you're, going to be traveling in March and you're looking for somewhere to go, sunny Florida, warm Florida, not warm today, but sunny, warm Florida in March would be a great place to go and visit the museum collection and support those guys. So that should be a lot of fun. The other thing, BHS class of 82. Okay. They're already planning their reunion for Panama for next year. So make sure that if you are planning on doing that, or if you're not sure if you are or not, either Mayra Linares Sites or Frank Pereira are working on that. So get in touch with them. They've got, of course, the BHS Class of 82 Facebook page. Make sure you reach out to those guys as well. Get yourself involved. Confirm if you're going to go. They're trying to get a head count and start organizing things and help volunteer. One of the things that I've seen with these Canal Zone reunions, the whole reunion itself is fantastic, as we've seen from last week's show. That CZR just puts a bang up job, but the class reunions are really something special. They're really cool. You're running into people that you haven't seen in a long time. There's a lot of Panamanians that we went to school with that didn't move to the United States after graduating and whatnot. Maybe came here to go to college, but they're living back in Panama, and you don't often see them at the reunions in Orlando. So it's kind of cool to have that class reunion in Panama and get to hang out with them as well. So either way, though, class of 82, Mayra Linares Sites or Frank Pereira, get in touch with them. get on Facebook into the class reunion, BHS class of 82, and get signed up for that, guys. They're trying to get some numbers there. And then on our end here, guys, class of 81. I know, Ricky, you guys have some.
Yes, want to get in touch with Jose Payne or Elaine Peterson, who are both running our committee. Make sure you guys contact them, or they'll be contacting you because they are working real hard on getting all our addresses and our contact information.
Right on. So make sure you reach out to them. Same thing with class of 86. I'm not sure who's doing what right now for that because, again, we just wrapped up in less than 2 weeks ago the class of 86 reunion in Panama. But as usual, we have the big class reunions in Orlando as well. So stay tuned for information on that, and we'll get the ball rolling on that. So
at the end of the day, Willie, Orlando reunion is the largest place where you're going to catch the most Panama Canal Society people. Zonians, etc. People that went through the canal.
Right.
So yeah, make sure you book your trip on time and get your membership if you haven't already.
Yeah, indeed, because
it just went up $10, guys. Sorry, so it's $60.
Yeah. $60, which again, still, you're talking. It's a bargain, guys. To be a member of the Pan Canal Society for $60 is an absolute bargain. You're talking, it's still $1.50 a week. So you add a little tax to it now, but it's still, for what you get out of that, it's an absolute fantastic deal. So third line, yeah, it is. The HP's chiming in. It absolutely is. Dave's done a great job of putting together some really cool information, guys. Third locks is something we know now from 2016 with these new big giant locks they have, but
I have Andrew F. Tomides and his wife are traveling, and they stopped in San Francisco, and I had the pleasure of showing them around my neighborhood for one 24-hour period. And one thing I can tell you, Willie, though, I did notice David and worked hard on this show. I saw him and Andrew were working on it when he was we were having breakfast the other day.
Always does. In fact, Dave, I feel bad a lot of times because he puts in so much work for these shows. And sometimes, I'll get 60, 70, 80 slides, which obviously we can't get through all of them.
We can't show you guys all the slides, but we would love to show you all the slides.
He dives head first into this stuff. And now, as we're, upgrading things on the show and stuff, we're going to work in some other different newer graphics. But again, the information is rock solid that Dave puts together because, he is,
Willie, we have a lot of competition now. Panama. There's 5 or 6 different, channels out there now doing Canal and Panama history. Early, the 1903 history that we've been doing for quite a while now, 2 years.
And something interesting, Ricky. I've now that you mentioned that, you watch some of these things because if you're active on social media, you'll see a lot of them and you follow them. Of course, it makes sense to. It's kind of cool because a lot of times they serve as reminders of things that are going on, this week in history that are cool to bring up on the show as well. But the one thing that starts to happen now with that is while there's a vast history of the Canal Zone in Panama, it is still somewhat limited in scope, and therefore you'll start seeing pictures that you've seen posted several times, and a lot more people will start posting it and whatnot. And so that's one of the cool things about what we do here is that we bring a lot of context and narrative to it and not just throw a picture with a caption on it, right? There's a story behind it, and now with this new graphics format we're using, it's creating even more of a story. So it is something that to your point, there's a lot of Canal Zone history and Panama history out there, and I think with the recent changes in Panama itself, people are waking up to this newfound curiosity, I guess you could call it, for some Canal Zone history that they haven't had for quite a long time, right? And so it is refreshing to have that stuff, and we always aim to stay ahead of the curve there and have a lot of that good stuff. So
it looks like Leafy is done with Panama. He's on his way out.
Good for you, Leaf. Safe travels, man. Hope everything. It was good seeing you there. Happy birthday to you, and it was good seeing you there with your mom the other day. That was really
Chris
cool.
Jeffries is joining us. Way to go! Hello, Zonians, Sony, Kentucky. Snowy. We got lucky out here on the West Coast. We got warm weather. You guys, everybody else got freezing weather. We got
and it's impacting even down to Panama. They've been talking about.
Oh, I heard about that. It's getting cold down there. It's pushing it down.
And real windy too. Apparently, this cold air as it pushes down in the Caribbean, it's really creating some winds, and it's been real gusty conditions in Panama for last
we have a Zonian that just came back that I'm trying to recruit to come on and tell us his experience. Billy Drummond.
Right on.
He did the whole Volcan and Boquete and Cerro Punta, and trying to get him on to tell us how that was all, what that's all about. But he did mention, because I watched it on his Instagram account, that the wind in Volcan is something else. It's like,
I can imagine.
yeah, it's not for the weak.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know that I think it was Carlos Lane went after the reunion, went and did quite a few trips into the El Valle was another big destination. I saw several of large groups of some of the classes. I think like a class of 76. I think a big.
There's a lot of Zonians that live in El Valle. It's a big expat community there.
Yeah. But so it went. There was a lot of people that went into Boquete and into El Valle, and yeah, it was. We've been getting a lot of those reports. So, but that's cool that everybody's doing that. And this is again, I guess you could call this a side effect of this new Canal Zone reunion that's getting people to go down there. And oftentimes in one of these instances, it's probably a lot more fun to go to visit those places with a group of friends that you probably last time you went there was the last time they went there as well, 30, 40 years ago, so makes it extra special. It's really cool what these guys are doing, and bringing the zone in Panama back to
600. One thing I always say about the Zonians is when we go to Panama, we go to spend money, And speaking of that, recent news, they did one of the travel magazines. Which travel destination do people spend the most money? Okay. Number 1, Panama, over $2,000 per person. Of course, that includes airfare, hotel, everything. Number 1 in the world, Panama.
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I mean, Panama offers so much. I mean, it really is
never in the world, in the West,
in the Western Hemisphere.
Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, right on. Fair enough. But no, it is. I mean, Panama offers so much. It really does. It's a place you can go and do so much. You want to go to the beaches. You want to go to the mountains. You want to go to and literally in the same day. That's the best part about it. You can have breakfast up in the mountains and then be out on the beach during the day and and then go down a river in the afternoon somewhere and do something else. It really is a really, really fantastic time.
Class of 81 there, Mark Cicero.
Yeah, Cicero's had a big presence in the zone for that reunion. That was really cool.
Maybe we should bring Mark on, talk to us about that, and talk about our reunion. Mark, come on.
Yeah.
We haven't had you on for a while.
Yeah, well, and he's been, got some other good
By writing some music, yes. Come come hang out with us and chit-chat. Let everybody know what you're up to, Mark.
Yeah, you know what, Mark? We're gonna start working on a surfing show or episode. So maybe there's a surfing tune in there somewhere that might be in the works there. So that might be pretty cool. But that's for another show. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is the history of the Canal Zone. Before we do that, though, of course, we got to pay our bills, right? So we got to make sure that we give love to our friends at Howler Monkey Sauce. We are getting through the first half of that campaign, so we're getting ready to meet some new Howler Monkeys. Not just yet, but we're going to bring back the ones we've had originally, and then in the next couple of weeks, the new ones are coming out. And like I said, that fourth Howler Monkey, that's going to be a Zonian choice to see who that is. And remember, guys, it doesn't have to be a male monkey. We've got 3 of them already, so the last one, the hot one, make it some hot mama or something, but it'll be your choice there. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get those bills paid and talk to you guys about this Howler Monkey Star Search.
Howler Monkey Sauce sent me to the jungles of Panama in search of their new spokesperson, and let's see if we find them.
Hey, listen, you don't need to keep looking for a spokesperson. You found me. I love this Howler Monkey hot sauce.
Wow. Okay, and what's your name?
They call me Balboa up here in these trees.
Roll camera and action.
This one, the Amarillo, is going to be amazing on chicken. Trust me.
Do you know a howler monkey who can describe the sweet heat of our original with authentic ají chombo peppers, or the fresh punch of verde where habanero warmth meets crisp bell pepper? How about the bold tang of Amarillo, yellow Scotch bonnets blended with mustard seeds? And of course, our hot, the same great flavor as original, with red habaneros for that fire. Our sauces are all natural, no preservatives, gluten-free, pure flavor and pure fire. Are you the next Howler Monkey spokesperson?
All right, I had to hurry up and throw together a quick background. I was like, oh no, I have no background here. But so anyway, Dave, welcome, man. Happy Friday to you, man.
How you doing?
Hi, Dave.
We're here. You know, it's
All right. We're having a little bit of a rambunctious cat that does not want to leave the scene.
Oh,
so-
cats are totally invited on this
sounds like a
podcast.
jaguar. Sounds like an ocelot.
Yeah, she wants to jump on the laptop the whole time. So.
Ocelots, poor ocelots. Ocelots ever win? Do you guys know? Not in my years, they never won.
Yeah, they were pretty good in '83.
83, they were good. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I played it was
Zorla and Clipper and
okay, yeah, Clipper had him. That guy could throw a curveball.
Oh, he could pitch. Yes.
Party Jordan. Yeah, they had a good
Oh, that's
team.
Party too. Okay, all right, they had a good team. Yeah, but normally those guys are always in last place.
Well, anyway, so Dave, man, good to see you. We're in for a treat this Friday because we're talking a lot about the canal, a lot of different things that went on with the canal that have to do with widening it and fixing it, and some things that maybe thank God we didn't do. But
Yeah, it's something I wanted to talk about for a while. You don't hear a whole lot about it, but I know earlier you were talking about there are other groups that are doing a lot of Panama Canal history and stuff, and I've seen a lot of those. But after we left, there wasn't a whole lot of we didn't have internet. There weren't a whole lot of places to go. But then more recently with Canal Zone Images and some of these things I got on the internet, that's kind of where the canal history has been available, but really
Researched.
not a video broadcast like this, like we have now. And then of course the Panama Canal Museum. So, hats off to all those guys before us that put all that stuff out there.
Yeah.
And, I was on, just a couple hours ago, I was online and someone was posting an article about some of the topics we're talking about. It had a byline date of today and another one was 2 months ago. So, some of this information, some people are looking through it and it's being posted, so if you look 3 months ago, some of this information wasn't there.
Sure. It's piquing people's interest.
And I guess there's a lot of interest in Panama now with the canal issues and stuff. And, it's a much more attractive place to visit. There's a lot more stuff going on here, a lot more tourism. So it's an exciting time. And so tonight I wanted to talk about some things that we haven't really talked about too much. There's not really a whole lot of information about some of this stuff. I won't call it top secret or anything, but I think they kept this information a little bit hidden from the public.
Sure. They didn't have billboards advertising it. Yeah.
So basically a topic tonight, we're going to talk about, why were the towns of Margarita, Coakley, and Diablo Heights built in the 1940s? And, these new towns were funded and constructed to house the workers that were needed to construct the Third Locks project. So we'll talk briefly about the history associated with those towns. And then we'll also talk about why did the U.S. attempt to build bigger locks in the 1940s? They just built the canal. Why do they need a bigger one? But the U.S. authorized the construction of a Third Lock project in 1939. And so we'll discuss the purpose, the location, and the progress that they made and why the project was stopped. And we'll also discuss the issue of a fissure. It's a crack in the rock that they found at the Gaillard Cut at Contractors Hill and how that affected canal operations. It was called Project 13A, but it was also part of Project 13, which was originally to widen the cut a little bit. It was narrow at one point. Only one ship could pass at a time. Mm-hmm. And so Project 13 was a larger construction project to widen the cut. And then when I guess they were doing their evaluations, they found a crack. And so they did an emergency project and they named that 13A. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll also talk about the U.S. attempt to build the sea level canal in the 60s using nuclear bombs. And so the U.S. studied the construction of a nuclear sea level canal using thermonuclear bombs. and we'll discuss the purpose and location and the progress and the issues that stopped that project.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
yeah, lots to talk about.
It is, and to me, of all of that stuff, I guess what's most ironic is that they're exploring a sea level canal after going through all this trouble and realizing that the most effective way is a locks canal with different levels, and yet here they're thinking, wait a minute, we're going to go back to sea level.
Wait. 1914, they didn't have nuclear explosions.
Well, no, but the concept of a sea level canal, the nuclear weapons isn't what was going to make it sea level. That was just going to make the digging easier. But the fact that they were still wanting to go back to a sea level canal is what I find interesting. Because as we know, the tides are way different on the Atlantic and Pacific, and I'm just curious as how that would work.
Well, when they built the canal, a few years later, they started doing studies about the capacity of the canal, and ships were starting to get bigger, and the more people were using the canal.
Sure.
And so they did estimates that said that the Panama Canal would reach capacity by 1970, and then some of the investigators said no, it could reach capacity by 1940.
Sure.
So others said 1960. So between 1940 and 1970. So it takes 15 years to build that canal.
Yeah.
So 1930 thereabouts, they're thinking, hey, we got to do something about that.
We may hit capacity in 10 years, possibly.
Right. And then also, too, they had issues with, defending that canal from air attacks. When they built that canal, they didn't have airplanes.
Sure.
And, so there were estimates that said that, a 5-mile buffer on either side of the canal wasn't large enough distance to defend it from, like an airplane attack.
Right.
You only have 5 miles to react. That's, for a plane, that's just seconds.
Correct.
And you probably launch your missile or your torpedo beyond that.
Sure.
And I think we've talked about it in the past that one of the generals early on was said that if you want to protect this canal, you need all of it. You need to basically move everyone to David.
Sure. Well, hence the reason why Rio Alto was an air base.
So from a military perspective, having a canal, with a civilian population right next to it wasn't ideal.
No.
But originally when the French won it, they wanted a 6-mile corridor. And the U.S. original treaty too was a 6-mile corridor. But that was just for a trench, essentially. Everyone wanted to build a sea level canal at that point. The U.S. started with the sea level canal in mind, and then a year or two later, they're like, oh, we've got to build the Lux Canal. Yeah. We can't do this. But the Navy also, their battleships were designed to be wider than the 110 feet, and so they knew that canal was obsolete. So they went looking. Congress authorized some funds to go study, and they went back. They looked in Mexico. They looked in Nicaragua. Basically that Nicaraguan route has many
that little route wouldn't go away, man.
that are perfect for canal. I mean, yes, it is longer, and one of the things that they found out that it's longer. It takes more people to defend. I think they estimated it would take 40,000 troops to defend that versus 16,000 in the Panama Canal. And there was a lot of political strife and revolutions and stuff going on there. So Nicaragua had its problems, but from a canal perspective, that's why it was always so popular. It was always number one because it had a lot of attributes going for it.
So we get started there. So it looks like in 1941, then they authorized it. And now, what were we talking about as far as the dimensions of this versus what we currently had?
Well, the current locks are 1,000 feet by 110 feet, and what they were looking at doing was building a new locks because they also were designing a bigger battleship called the Montana class battleship. and that beam was being designed at 121 feet. So they needed a new lock chamber that was 1,200 feet long, so 200 feet longer, and at least 125 feet wide. And some, I've seen it presented two ways, either 125 or 140.
Okay.
But it needed at least be 125. So 1,200 feet by 125 was the minimum that they needed. And also they needed more draft. Those battleships had a 37-foot draft, and so they needed at least 45 feet, which was more than what the current canal could do. And so they looked at, they looked at the cost to do those canals in the Panama Canal area was much less expensive than
Sure.
Nicaragua. And the U.S. actually passed a bill to fund. They spent $777 million to fund that Nicaraguan canal, and they were trying to negotiate a treaty and such. But the Depression came,
Yep.
1931, and they said can't do it.
No money.
And no money. Yeah. So they were going to build a canal in Nicaragua. At least they had the intention to do that.
Sure.
There was a lot of political strife there, but the president of Nicaragua afterwards, I don't know if he sued the U.S., but he basically said, "Hey, I want $15 million from you guys for not building that thing."
He already made promises.
Yeah. So basically, there was an idea back then that the Panama Canal had limitations, and from a military perspective, they needed another canal. Plus, they didn't want, if something happened to the Panama Canal, they wanted to have another option. And so, from early on, there was talk about finding another canal, and sea level was always the preference because you don't have the size limitation, you don't have any, the locks.
Right.
And so that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, Vern has a question there. Wasn't the plan to build that sea level canal further south in the Darien region?
Well, we're getting to that. They looked at the original route in Mexico. There was a spot through Mexico. They were thinking also through Nicaragua. And then they had a couple of routes through Panama, through San Blas area and Darien, and even one closer to the Colombian border. So there were several routes that were looked at, but the three primary ones were the Darien route, Nicaraguan, and I believe Mexico one. Outside of ours, of course. Yeah. Yeah, basically they were going to replace the Panama, what we know. We got a bigger canal that can do that stuff, and I guess you can choose which one you want. But I haven't, there's not a whole lot of information about this stuff because it was all kind of like military decisions, not necessarily commerce that was driving the bus there.
Correct.
Well,
it was all predicated on the size of that battleship. That's
exactly.
Who wanted to do it.
And that third lock project was, at the time it was hailed as going to be the single greatest engineering.
Well, you can see it right there on the right on that picture, how wide that was. I mean, we know that's the French cut. We jumped off that and swam across and whatnot, but wow, when you look at it aerial, look at how big it is.
Yeah, and we know that it isn't the French cut, in fact, but that's what we like to call it. But that it was actually that the U.S. efforts at that third locks. Yeah. But the other thing that I find interesting about that is that, one of the big keys to Panama that we've been learning both here and with this project that Captain Andrew's working on with the defense of the canal was that suddenly, as Dave just mentioned, the military was playing a big role in this and pushing a lot of these decisions and requests and whatnot. But the flip side of that was they were suddenly realizing, wait a minute, some of these options, while they may be better for certain logistics, for us, it's going to spread us thin because, keeping it locally here is going to, keep things closer together, much easier to defend. And that's something I know that Dave's going to go over here as to why that was important, both as a reason to do it and also as a reason not to do it. Right. Yeah.
To just back up a little bit. The U.S. decided. One of the things is President Franklin Roosevelt
Yep.
went down to Panama in the 30s a couple of times, but in 1939 he signed a treaty of friendship. So they knew that they were going to be doing this third lock project, and they need kind of like, not, I don't know if they needed permission, but they needed to discuss some of the concerns that they had, especially with security and military needs for that. So they signed a new treaty with Panama at the time, um, and and then in 1939, Congress approved the project, and they said you have 6 years to build this, and then they didn't fund it, and they didn't fund it until the next year. So they didn't fund it until 1940. Um, but at that time, they had already had this treaty with Panama that says, you have the ability to build the third locks and to look at sites inside and outside of the canal zone to protect it. So we talked about in one of our previous issues about all the airstrips and stuff that were built outside the canal zone.
Right. Yep.
And so that basically had started before World War II started. But I think
Yep.
once Pearl Harbor happened, it probably got accelerated some.
Sure, and that reprioritized a lot of things as well. And an interesting thing we're learning from this graphic here and from some of the stuff you sent me was that FDR was the first sitting president to transit the canal.
He was his first journey was on the USS Houston in 1934. I believe it was July 11th, 1934. So he was the first U.S. president to transit the canal.
Nice. 1934 FDR and the first canal. And so again, he played a big role in that. And then, obviously he continued on all the way through into World War II, as we've learned from US history. So, he probably had in this case, he had, front row seat, I guess, firsthand knowledge of the canal, the operation, the value of it, and the dangers of having to protect it, I guess, or the challenges, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things that the Caribbean commanding general of the Caribbean Command said that they didn't want the locks right next to the existing locks.
Yeah.
Because it would just make the defense that much harder.
Sure.
And if there was an air attack and the dams were blown up or the gates were blown off and the water escaped, you have these larger locks. It just makes your target easier.
Sure. Well, and that was always the number one concern of defending the canal. You can rebuild the locks, you can rebuild the structures there, but there's no faster way of replenishing the water. Once you burst those dams or those locks, that water's going. Gravity's going to run it out. Yeah. And so that was always the big concern.
There was an estimate that it would take 2 years to fill up the lake again.
So you have no canal for 2 years.
And if you had any ships in the canal during that time and the water's gone,
yeah,
you're not moving them.
Yeah, exactly. They're stuck there. Absolutely. And so that was the really big concern. So now what Dave's referring to here is that this general is looking and going, wait a minute. So now instead of, we know there's 3 sets of locks on the Atlantic side. There's 3 sets, on the Pacific side. And then there's those dams, right? So there's 8 targets there. Now you add a new 3rd set of locks, you're adding another 4, 5, 6 more targets that any one of those is enough to take the canal out of commission for several years.
Right.
So
you just made our job harder and their job easier.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
So,
great point.
Yeah. And well, what else was there? I don't know. I'm having a hard time seeing your graphics because I don't have it big enough on my screen. But
so right now I'm just showing the one of FDR, his connection there, where his family legacy with Aspinwall and his trip to Panama.
Okay. All right. Well, that's on my next. That's on my next one. But I guess what I'll say here is we're not going to do the Silver Gatoon.
Oh, that comes next.
All right. Okay. So on mine, I'll do the FDR. Some interesting trivia that I found about FDR is that FDR's great uncle was William Aspinwall.
How about that?
And you know who William Aspinwall is?
Sure. Cologne.
He's
Mr. Cologne.
he's the guy that built the Panama Railroad. You know, he only went to Panama one time, and it was before the railroad was built.
And yet his name is synonymous with the Atlantic side, as if he lived down there.
Yeah, he bankrolled it.
That's what it was. That's what. Hey, if you sign a check, you're.
You know how some of these people like to have their names put on stuff. But actually, he didn't ask for that. It was one of his lieutenants in Cologne that said, "Hey, let's name this place Aspinwall." You know, and we talked about that before. That the Colombians were apoplectic about that. They're like,
Sure.
"Get that name off of there. We're not going to even mail you. We're not going to even deliver you mail if you have that name on there." But so Aspinwall married FDR's grandfather. So that's how they're related.
Interesting. Wow.
And actually, FDR visited the canal construction in 1912, and this was before he was president. He was a New York State senator at the time.
Right.
And then in 1913, he became Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and that was under Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson was president when the canal was inaugurated. And then in 1933 or 1929, he became governor of New York, and in 1933, he became president of the United States.
Huh.
And during that time, well, he was actually president 4 terms. So he's number 32, number 33, number 34, and number 35.
Yeah, it just didn't make it through. You know,
so he's the goat of presidents. I mean,
Yeah,
4
it-
terms. You can't
it
do that
is.
anymore.
no, can't do that anymore.
But he visited Panama 4 times during his presidency, and one of his trips in '34, he was on the USS Houston cruiser, and so he was the first to transit the canal. And his focus was on operational and military security of the canal, and also to ease international tensions. There was a lot of revolutions going on in Central America. He was the first president to visit South America. In fact, one of the trips, it might have been the 34 trip, after he left Panama, he went down to South America and became the first president to visit South America.
Mhm.
But as a Secretary of the Navy and such, his interest was in military security and
Sure.
those types of things. And of
Well,
course,
prior to World War II, remember we didn't have a 2-ocean navy yet, so getting
exactly.
back and forth was critical.
So
And speaking of World War II, our guest, Mr. Anstuz, likes to remind us that during the World War II, several ships were sunk
Yeah.
off the Atlantic side by these German U-boats.
Yeah. No, they were active through the Caribbean. I mean, they definitely were.
I mean, as much as we know about World War II, what a crazy time. I mean, that must have been hell to deal with.
Yeah. On a daily basis, all over the world.
All over the world, and the destruction and the amount of destruction and the amount of territory that was taken and I mean, how they put all that logistics together, and
Incredible.
they wanted to build these Montana class battleships before the war. They never even got built.
No.
And that's the reason why the Third Locks project stopped. It's because they realized, hey, we've got too much men and material going to build this thing. We're not even going to build these ships.
Yeah.
We need to divert, the construction equipment, the materials, and get these men that are constructing this thing to put on a uniform, go over and fight.
Well, in 1942, if you think about World War II history, if you know your World War II history, in the first half of 1942, although we weren't that far separated from Pearl Harbor, it had only been 6 or 7 months. and Japan had made massive gains across the Pacific, but it was in May of 42 that we had Midway, right? And the Battle of Midway turned the tide of the war, and it was all because of aircraft carriers. And suddenly the United States said, wait a minute, battleships may not be our primary weapon moving forward. We've got a new way to project power.
Yeah. So, FDR was president during this time. And so when they were doing this third locks and all these things, he had his hand in it. He probably wasn't as out there as Teddy was, but
right.
But he had his pulse. And of course, why can't I think of his name?
Truman?
England.
Oh, Churchill.
Churchill lived with him at the White House.
Right. Well, and Churchill himself was from a naval background as well prior to becoming prime minister. So, they both had a very keen sense of navies and the needs of a navy and the importance of the Panama Canal.
Okay. All right. So let's keep on moving on this a little bit. So, this locks gets approved in 1939. Funding comes in 1940, and they have 6 years to build it. And the first
Okay. And I know what it is, so I'm not going to throw it out there. But anybody else want to take a wild guess what the name of that dredge was? Because it was a very important dredge there.
I would go like Hercules or something, because the amount of work those guys did.
Hercules was a crane.
Right.
It's
well, I'll give you a clue. If you look on the screen, you'll figure it out. But
well, it's a famous postage stamp.
Okay, hold on. They're saying they can't hear you in this view. Hold on. Let me try something here. You should be able to. How about now, HB?
Can you hear me now? All right.
Testing 1 2 sibilance.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, the name of the dredge that started that third locks excavation was the Cascadas.
There you go, Andrew Eftimitis.
Andrew, yeah. There's a famous bed and breakfast there in Balboa that you can go to called Cascadas. But the Alsprague stamp has the Cascadas on it. It's a very, very famous thing. But I didn't know it helped build at least the beginnings of the third locks canal.
Yeah, those are those big channels that you see.
It as the French cut, but it wasn't the French cut. It was the third locks project. And so they started at Gatun locks, and they also started across from Miraflores locks in July of 1940. And that one, of course, was before Pearl Harbor as well.
Yeah, right.
And so I started looking at, well, how much progress did they make? I can go in the canal records and I can find, on a daily basis, how many tons of rock and stuff they moved and all this. And then this project, nada. It's like it didn't exist.
Right.
I've found 2 pictures and, but they did a good amount of work in the 2 years that they were working on it.
Well, the footprint remained until the new canal came back in after 2000.
Mm-hmm. So, when you look at those pictures, you can see that they dredged out. You had them up earlier that showed where the third locks were right next to the existing locks.
Right.
And it looks like they dug out most of it, and they were just about ready where they could start, building the actual locks portion of it.
Yeah, and it's back up on the screen again, guys. The view here, this is Miraflores locks. Obviously, you can see at the top of the screen the causeway, but directly to the right of the Miraflores locks was that gap there, and that's what was part of that we thought was the French cut, and turns out no, that wasn't. That was actually what they were building into the third locks there. Absolutely.
Right. And on the Atlantic side, there is a French cut, but it's on the other side of the canal.
Right.
You can go, and it's so much smaller than what our canal is. But But I could never find any information about what they did at Pedro McGill. Of course, there you have Gaillard Cut and all that other stuff. But it just could have been that they knew about some of the issues that were there, and they did the easy part first. But one of the things I found interesting is that the bridge at Miraflores, the swing bridge, was part of the Third Locks Canal project. So that bridge was constructed during that time, and that's why that bridge is there, and that's how it got funded.
Okay.
So we had those that those canal areas that were dug to the sides of the locks, and then we had the Miraflores Bridge, and those were the remnants of the Third Locks project.
That makes sense. Now that you mention that, if you think about it, there was no way to get across this canal up until 1962 unless you took a ferry. And that's not practical to be building a new set of locks in a new canal and have to rely on a ferry 20 miles away to be moving stuff back and forth. So they had to put a bridge right there. That makes sense. That's interesting.
So then the next is, why was this project stopped? And we talked about a little bit earlier that the Montana class battleships, they canceled those in May of 42.
Yep.
They realized that battleships weren't going to win the war.
Obsolete.
They needed aircraft carriers, they needed airplanes, they needed submarines, and battleships. As big and powerful as the Iowa class battleships were, they basically were relegated to escort duty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they probably did a lot of damage too, but they're not what the U.S. Navy needed. And I think after that, I think we realized, that just the aircraft carriers got bigger and bigger, and the planes got bigger and faster, and
sure.
And so they scrapped that. Priorities changed, and then
but
stopped the project.
So they took it off the table. But it had already started going on, as we've seen there in 1940. So guess what? We had to already start supporting the personnel and everything there. And that leads to this next part of Dave's presentation, which is these small towns.
Yeah. So I also wanted to say that, for the 2 years that they worked on it, they spent about $75 million to do that dredging and stuff. And I estimate, based on the cost, based on how much they thought they were going to spend, up to $277 million to build this thing, that they've got about 40% of it done.
Wow!
In those 2 years, and I had 6 years to do it.
Great spot for swimming, jumping, and according to two of our friends here, great spot for fishing as well.
Yeah, about that.
All right. So now there's some, there were towns that were needed to house these workers that were coming in to work on these dredging projects and construction and all that stuff, just like the original canal. Hey, we're bringing all these people in. There's about 2,500 people in Diablo, and 2,500 people in Coakley, and 1,500 in Margarita. We need housing for them. We need new towns, and so there were 3 new towns that were proposed to be built to house these workers. And some of the interesting things that I found is that one of the towns used to be on a hog farm.
There you go. Yeah, we got the graphic up on the screen there. So it's Margarita.
So does anyone know?
Sorry.
What town was built on a hog farm?
I was always going to say Diablo Heights, but you got beat there. Hey, but
yeah, it was Margarita, which is amazing.
Margarita. All right. So the story behind well, I guess let me see if anyone knows the answer to this question. And what town was also known as a popular lover's lane?
Oh, I should know that. No, just kidding.
Oh, there you go.
If I had to choose what was the most lover lane town, I would have to go with
Chris.
Coakley.
All right. Now, it was also Margarita. I guess, it was a spot in between Cristobal and Gatun, and not a whole lot there. But the story is that, how Margarita got its name is that you had Fort Randolph was built on this little island called Margarita Island.
Yep.
And then the locals knew that area as Margarita Island, and then they built Fort Randolph on it. So what happens when something changes? You remember the old stuff. You don't remember the
Yes,
new.
go back to the old stuff. Nobody likes change.
So the old timers knew it as Margarita Island, not Fort Randolph. And then in 1917, Mount Hope was the area where they did a lot of the commissary stuff. They had a dairy, industrial area, and they built a concrete road from Fort Randolph to Mount Hope, and they called that road Margarita Road because it went from Margarita Island to and then the Mount Hope needed a hog farm, and they picked that area where Margarita is to put the hog farm.
So the Mount Hope Hog Farm became Margarita, and it was also Lover's Lane.
Yes, it had been used as Lover Lane before it was a pig farm, hog farm.
Okay, I was gonna say because I mean, imagine wow, hey honey, you smell so great. It's like it's not me, it's a hog farm.
The hog farm ended up being closed in the 20s when they ended up having a hog cholera.
No, there you go.
Talked about how bad the conditions were in Cologne.
Sure.
With cholera and all that stuff, and probably the same thing with the animals.
Well, and they're probably quite trigger happy when it comes to diseases anyway, because they're just 5 years removed from building the canal, and people died all over the place from diseases in the canal. So when you got an outbreak, you take care of that shit quick, man. There's a lot of memories of people not making it through these outbreaks. It's amazing.
So they built the house. They built the housing there in Margarita because it basically it was a empty field, and even though the work was being done at Gatun Locks, the area above Gatun, which is known as Agua Clara, said the area was just a little bit like too hilly to be able to put the housing up there and stuff. So they chose Margarita because it was less expensive,
right?
And it was built to be a gold town.
That's right. They want a gold roll.
Yeah. So the gold roll workers of the Third Lock projects were put there, and also people that worked in the commissary, the policemen, the fire, school teachers, they worked there too. And so it was a brand new community, but just like in the old days, you had the new one, and then when in 1955, when there was another treaty that basically reverted. We've talked about the reversion of Cristobal, to Panama. That town was given to Panama, so those people in Cristobal had to move, and a lot of them moved into Margarita.
Okay,
because when the Locks project stopped, a lot of that housing became vacant.
Sure,
and it was probably pretty quiet for a while.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of people that moved into those places initially were there for construction, not necessarily to operate and work on the canal after it's built. And so once they figured out you're not going to build a canal, these constructors, they went back home. They weren't needed anymore.
Exactly. And Vern, I see Vern's comment talked about the Red Barn, and I remember going to Margarita and seeing the Red Barn, and he said that used to be used by the hog farm.
Interesting.
That would make sense.
Okay.
But they also rebuilt that town in the 50s. It was, they had, you can read articles that talked about when in the 40s, when it was built, some of the houses were prefab. They could build those houses in a day.
Wow.
I would imagine it was like, we've got the funding. We need 6 years. Get your butt here.
Yeah.
Here's your house.
Get them a house before you. Yeah, no doubt. Make it appealing to arrive.
And they called them doll houses. I guess they were small little houses, and they called them doll houses.
I would imagine if you can put it up in a day, it can't be very big.
Prefab for sure.
And but then then in the 50s they started building the concrete homes and some of the other types of things there. And in the old days, when they built that town in the 40s, apparently there was a street that was called Espave Street, and that area had an old wild cashew forest, and that's what Espave is, a cashew tree.
Yeah.
And but according to my source, I didn't check with Vern, but maybe he knows this, that there's no Espave Street in the 70s.
Okay.
So they must have reconfigured that area. Probably took down those cashew trees and put in housing. Um, but so it's probably not there anymore. But that would have been
Interesting.
pretty cool to have a cashew forest.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Don't they call that Marañón in Spanish?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yep,
what's
yep,
the
right, right,
trivia? It's
exactly.
Marañón. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. And also, my source Margarita tells me that all the cool kids lived on Sixth Street.
Ah,
I
how
have
about
no
Margarita,
that?
idea
yeah.
where Sixth Street
Margarita
is.
was the Balboa of the Atlantic side, right?
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's where the cool people were.
Hmm.
Okay. All right.
So I said I would report that information. I can't confirm that, but
Okay.
I wonder
Well,
who that came
that's the
from.
story of
Which Atlantic
Margarita then.
cider?
Interesting how Margarita came to be and what it all
Yeah.
became from a pig farm and all that good stuff. Then
Yeah.
and then there were a couple other towns. What was the next big town that had a
well, we'll go over to Coakley. Coakley was on the West Bank.
let's talk about Coakley.
Yeah, and Coakley, it also started in 1940, and there was a gold Coakley, and there was a silver or local rate Coakley.
Oh, okay.
So we still see those same themes, gold and silver.
Yeah. And this
In
is
the
far into the
40s.
40s now. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. But I think they did change the term from silver to local rate
Mm-hmm.
around that time as well.
Okay.
But still, you had the separation
Yeah, right.
of classes essentially,
Sure.
or races really. And then it's the same thing, for 2 years, everything was booming and then bust. And then in 1952, Coakley was averted to the Navy, so that housing became part of the Navy. I guess a lot of the people that worked at Rodman were living there.
Interesting.
And then in 1954, Coakley was transferred to the Army. And by the 80s, I don't know that I really knew anyone that lived in Coakley. I mean, I knew of it, but you could see it from the Pan American Highway there. But
You know what? At St. Mary's, there was a few people that went to that lived in Coakley that went to St. Mary's.
so I don't know that I really ever went there.
What?
I mean, I would go there because my dad would fly model airplanes, and they had the model airplane club had the field out there.
Oh yeah. Well, I hung out with Jerry, so that's why we were always out there.
There was
John McGee, right on Johnny.
that housing area. I remember there was a Chinese Gardens like right across the street, and if you pulled in there and went, you could see the housing on the other side. But
Interesting. Yeah, you're right though. I don't remember being in the housing area either. You're right. I just remember going to, like I said, with my dad. To
Well,
go fly
how about
model
all the
airplanes.
contractors? They all had those
Yeah.
like RV homes.
yeah, I never went there. I went to some RV homes that were in Corundu.
Yeah, just like
But
that. But
Similar, very similar layout. But
very
in Coakley.
similar to that. Like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I do remember
But-
that.
I just remember that area. It didn't look to be in that great a shape. And then when I looked
Yeah,
on
the
the area,
Rogers
it
lived out
doesn't
there.
seem to be there anymore. So
Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
correct. The
Sandy
Willie Rogers.
Yes, I did. I was
You
going to
guys
say Willie
remember
Rogers
him.
and those guys lived there.
Yeah, I paddled
And-
with Willie, so we would always go out there and work on our Cayuco at his house out there.
And the image in on your slide shows the 4-family house that
Right.
was there.
Birdcage,
And
they call
that
it.
was very similar to the 4-family houses that I lived in Ancon.
Yeah, yeah.
And also I lived in one there was some like that in Gamboa. In fact, one of the pictures I saw, it was listed as Coakley, and I'm like, no, that's got to be those
Yeah,
houses.
In
Yeah,
front
looked
of
very
the old
Gamboa.
Diablo Elementary School, there's a couple houses like
Yeah,
that.
listen, that was the big family houses until we started putting those breezeway houses that we learned
Yeah.
about recently.
The concrete
Well,
ones. Yeah.
when I was born, I lived on Chagres Street in Ancon, and my upstairs neighbors were the Andersons, Kevin Anderson, and the Ravellos, Patty Ravello and Martine Ravello. I don't think Patty
Right.
was born yet, but
That's one
so
pretty
those
girl.
4-family houses, people. That's where you started out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think those are the only ones that I didn't live in the zone as far as styles go. You know, we lived in on Barnaby Street, so we had the big concrete, the white ones there with the red roofs.
You know what? Those must have been for the police because so many policemen lived in that area.
Maybe it
'Cause
was
we
convenient. It was
that's
close
where
to
we
the police
started.
station.
Yeah,
Think about it. I mean, you could literally walk from our place to the police station. It was really a
Right.
block and a half
Yeah.
away.
Yeah,
But
my dad always walked.
Amador Road, they had all those wooden houses. They were single family homes, but they were on the stilts. Those are those old wood houses as well.
Right.
Um,
So,
but
yeah.
interesting.
But one of the last thing I'll tell you about Coakley is that
Yeah, correct,
you know,
Leafy.
one of my favorite songs is by this group called Heart,
Mm-hmm.
and the Hart sisters, Anna and Nancy Wilson. Their father was stationed in Panama, worked for the embassy as a Marine Guard,
Okay.
and they always talk about living in Panama. And I haven't been able to find out where exactly, but I would suspect that Coakley um, was a good possibility that that's where they were housed at.
That's interesting. Hey, Steve.
So
See,
we may
Steve.
have some Zonian Rock and Roll Hall of Fame people.
Heck
that-
yeah, right on.
Yeah.
It would make sense.
That would be my first choice. I mean, it could be Farfan.
No, but you're
But-
probably right. It makes more sense. Farfan, I always think of it more like military.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, they were military.
Like
Oh,
the
okay.
like
Well,
the
there you go.
suburbs of Rodman.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So then the last town I'm going to talk about is Diablo Heights.
Oh, right
Diablo
on.
Heights. Here we go. There's
And
some
Diablo
cool information here because it got some notoriety here. This one
It
had some
was known
stature.
as the headquarters for Special Engineering Division,
See, look at that. Right on.
and
That's what's up.
they basically rebuilt it in the 1950s. But it was known as Camp Diablo originally, and it housed the Marine detachments back in Revolutionary time
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Makes sense.
interesting.
before they were moved to Camp Elliott in 1905.
Huh. Okay.
And Goethals officially named it Camp Diablo in 1906 to house European workers they call Gallegos.
Ah.
And they were there
yes.
to build the Sosa Corozal Dam. Remember
Yes.
us talking about they were going to make a lake,
Yeah.
Lake Sosa?
Yeah.
That was the first plans.
They were going to build a dam between Sosa Hill and the Cardenas Hill.
And that was for the sea level canal.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Right. But that's what they were going to do in 1906.
I mean, what a radically different landscape we would have grown up in if that was the case.
Like Dave said, we would have never would have had towns if it was sea level.
Yeah,
There was no need.
Yeah, no need for it.
Right. So
Or
we
very
would have never
little
been
need.
there. So
That's very true. Very, very true.
I might have lived there, but you guys
engineering changed
Yeah,
our
right.
destiny.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing is that they used they called SIP funds, Special Improvement Project funds. They were used to construct a town,
Okay.
and their specialty was to focus on special protective devices for the canal. So I would imagine, with this third locks, with all this concern about military safety and such,
Sure.
and I always remember my grandfather talking about these like emergency dams and stuff in case the locks were damaged. They could, basically block off the water and stuff like that.
Right.
So I can imagine that, whatever these guys could think of that they needed for safety and protection, these were the guys that were thinking about it and designing it and
Sure.
going to build it. I'd love to know what these guys worked on, but I can't find any information about it.
It's kind of like one of those labs like you see in James Bond, right? With all the gadgets.
Well,
and
yeah,
stuff.
and HB also mentioned that in Panama they don't even mention the third, the attempt for the third locks and all their history. Let me see if I can find that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, is because there is a lot of confusion about the third locks, the French Canal,
Yeah.
and my grandfather worked on some of these special projects, but you never hear about them,
Yeah.
and you never really hear about all the other sea level canals and canal routes and things that were talked about elsewhere. And basically, they were like, if we need to build the canal somewhere else, so be it. We'll
Correct.
close this one and build another one.
That's exactly it.
So, we always think about it. It's this canal is going to live forever, but it had a useful life, and basically it was built for the military. I mean, we talked about the Spanish American War and the Oregon taking forever to get over there. It was
Missing out on the war.
Military. So
Yeah. No kidding. No kidding. So that's
Not
fascinating.
because-
So now we know the third locks were planned well before the 2000s. They were planned again for the military and based on being able to move larger battleships through, which really was the whole end all be all. And then of course, midway through the war, in addition to the logistics and expenses, they realized, hey, wait a minute, man, we're not using these big fat battleships anymore. We don't need to spend this money in logistics doing this. Let's go ahead and put a stop to that. Now we ended up with some cool towns, Coakley, Diablo, Margarita, and stuff. Now let's move forward, Dave, because this is where things get, I guess, fascinating and a little scary as to what we're going to move into next, and where the United States decided that they wanted to learn a new technique for building a canal, man.
Well, there was a project, and it's called Project Plowshare, and you've probably never heard of it.
Nope, not until this week.
And the purpose of it was Atomic Energy Commission, the AEC, and the Nuclear Cratering Group, the NCG.
Okay.
They were trying to find, we dropped bombs at Hiroshima, Nagasaki, so that's what we know about atomic. But so these guys after the war were trying to find a peaceful use for controlled nuclear explosions.
Wow.
So they thought they could use it for, mining, for building harbors, to create tunnels. In fact, one of the articles I saw yesterday was how they were going to use these nuclear bombs to build highways. Basically Eisenhower went to Germany and saw the Autobahns and came back,
Right.
and we built the highway system. But, going through some of these mountainous areas where they needed tunnels and stuff to straighten out some of the land for these highways, they would, hey, maybe we could use some of these nuclear bombs to do that. And canals.
Radiate the whole country.
Maybe we could build the sea level canal
Right.
using nuclear bombs.
A lot
All
less
right.
shovels, man.
So there was a project. It's called Project Cherry. That they used, proposed for nuclear harbor in Alaska, and that one was a bust. Project Phaeton was a project that was intended to support. Okay, what happens if we detonate a 1 megaton explosive for excavating an Isthmian canal? So there were people that were studying these things, and this was done through Lawrence Research Lab at Berkeley University. So these guys were the Atomic Energy Commission and the Nuclear Cratering Group. That's where these scientists were working out of Berkeley, California. But they did these testings in the desert a lot of times, and so one of the specific geographic projects that was a major driver in establishing this Project Plowshare was a sea level canal across the Isthmus of Panama. So these
in a
nuclear
different
guys,
location, David, or close to, or the big ditches.
What was that? I couldn't hear.
I mean, with the new route that they were thinking, was it where the canal is now, or was it like to the left or to the right?
No. There were several locations that were being proposed, but primarily in Panama. One was called the San Blas route, and you can see that in the graphic. The red, it's kind of hard to see, but the red was called the San Blas route, and then another one, the Darien route. It was also called the Cesardi Morti path, and then the one down by the Colombia Panama border. So those were like and then you can see one up in Mexico, and then of course there was the one basically that sea level route through Nicaragua. The study was for an Isthmian. It didn't say Panamanian. This whole area could be called the Isthmus.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But Plowshare, Project Plowshare, is basically has a biblical reference where the idea was, beating atoms into from arms into plowshares, basically, it taking a weapon and then turning it into food, some economic purpose. So that's why it has this kind of strange name. Plowshare and Panama don't really match, but that was the brains behind this. So there was a specific project to do sea level canal, and then there were these multiple routes between. I think there were, I can't remember off of my hand because there's all these different studies and different times, but there were at least 7 routes I believe that were being proposed. But the 2 most viable were the San Blas route and the Sasardi Morty route, which basically is about 110 miles east of Panama City, and roughly the path that Balboa took on his discovery of the Pacific Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So it went from Caledonia down to San Miguel. We've talked about New Caledonia in the past.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
And then San Miguel, Bay of San Miguel, is where near where Balboa saw the Pacific. And the reason for that route is that, also using the nuclear, is that they estimated it would cost $650 million to build that sea level route, but a conventional construction would cost $5 billion. And that's an 85% savings.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an economic reason to do that. No locks, also a big win.
Yeah, no, you're talking almost 10 times the cost of doing it the conventional way, and everything else involved that we've learned from that,
Yeah. And also these things would be big enough that they would be 4-lane. So wow. So you could have 2 ships going east and west or north south and 2 going north south the other direction, because it would be that much wider.
Yeah, certainly.
It wouldn't just be single file.
Yeah.
So they did a number of studies. They were headquarters out of Lawrence Radiation Lab in Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And so what were they thinking about? If you look at Hiroshima Little Boy nuclear bomb, that was a 15 kiloton bomb, and Nagasaki, the Fat Man bomb, was a 21 to 22 kiloton bomb. And what we're talking about being used for the sea level canal in Panama was a 3 megaton bomb. I don't know how many factors, 15 kilotons goes to 3 megatons.
It says it's about 200 times the power.
Yeah. So these aren't little things. These are big, massive things. But you imagine they would have to do these the craters that they had to do. They would have to drill down between 800 and 2,600 feet into the earth to plant these bombs, and then they would explode a string of 15 of them at a time and detonate them.
Wow.
And you can imagine how much rock and debris and dust and radiation would be expelled
Mm-hmm.
at one time. I mean, this is a massive, but think how much weight, 800 feet of rock, 2,600 feet of rock would be. I mean, these are powerful, powerful bombs. And so they actually tested this. There was a project, it was called Project Sedan, and it was in the Nevada desert, and they detonated bombs that were it was only 104 kilotons, so it was even less than what they were going to maybe up to a megaton, 1 megaton bomb, but maybe larger. There's a lot of mountains and other things that you had to overcome that they didn't have in the desert. The desert was pretty flat, but so Project Sedan was like a test. It was 1962. And when they detonated this bomb, it produced a crater that was 320 feet deep and 1,200 feet wide.
So the width
And-
was good, like what they wanted, but it was much deeper than what they needed.
Well, yeah. And,
You know.
part of it is you have to look at the geology and all that other stuff. So there's a
Sure.
lot of science. You just don't. And that's why, some of them would be down at 800 feet, some would be down at 1,200 feet. But one of the things that they also found out when they did this testing is how far the gamma radiation would go.
Yeah.
And I guess they have this measure of like 1 regaton is kind of like you don't die at that level. But it would send that gamma radiation at least 50 miles and up to 100 miles.
Wow.
And then one of the things that they had with the nuclear regulations that were around, in the 60s, there wasn't a lot of nuclear regulations.
Right.
But
Certainly not like
one
today.
of the things that kind of agreed on is that if you're doing testing, you couldn't send your radiation into another country. So like that route that was right on the Colombian border,
Sure.
that wasn't going to work.
Yep, that's a no-go.
And then if you have radiation that goes 50 miles away, the sound blast route wasn't going to work. So basically, they were selecting this Sassardi Morty route because it was 110 miles away, and it was kind of,
it was in the Darien, very isolated.
Very isolated. Not a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it cost a lot of money. But there was a lot of savings with the nuclear. And one comparison is that, for a million BTUs of nuclear explosion, it would cost about 7.5 cents. Compared to using TNT, it would cost you $250.
Sure.
So if you go into a store and you say, I need a hammer, and one guy says, well, this hammer costs 7.5 cents and this one costs $250. And which one are you going to pick?
Yeah, right.
It's like, all right.
No brainer.
But it's like, except, I need a little hammer to hammer tacks in my shoes, and I don't need a sledgehammer. And so, so part of it is, the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
So, these guys were going to use up to 3 megaton bombs to build this thing. And do we have the graphics about what a nuclear explosion is? I can't really.
About what now?
The nuclear explosion, about the phase one, the 4 phases.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't have that one in here.
Okay, all right. Well, I have it in my notes here. I can skip over that. It's a little bit kind of too complex for this, but essentially, when you plant this bomb in the ground, it basically vaporizes all of the rock, and it turns all that rock into dust, and when it kind of lands back, it solidifies into a glass substance.
Hence the term, when they've always used the term about nuking somebody in the Middle East, turn it into glass, and that's what you're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, it gets so hot, and not only does it change that physical feature, it spews a whole lot of stuff out in the atmosphere.
Right. Yeah.
And then not only that, it also rolls it along the ground. So you have contamination at the ground level, and you have contamination in the atmosphere, and you have to worry about where that fallout is. But it essentially would create a canal that was 1,000 feet wide and 250 feet deep,
and unusable because it's so contaminated with radiation.
Yeah, well, that really was the reason why it failed so much, is because you still couldn't get over that.
Right. Yeah.
Who wants to work there?
Exactly.
Who wants to put your ship through there? What happens if the ship
Canal cruise? No thanks.
Yeah.
All bad.
So was it physically possible? Sure, but was it practical?
Nope.
No.
No.
So they did, like the Project Sedan and stuff like that. They did 22 different studies. They spent $175 million, but they deemed that it was politically impossible to do that. Mm-hmm. And I would think that, some of the, Eisenhower went down there in the 50s. I don't know that he expressly went down there to talk about nuclear canals.
No, I don't think he did. I
But
think as we've learned from you that he was down there to basically start the beginning of the end of the process.
yeah, but if there were people studying this, I know it wasn't until 1962, but
Right.
and he was president at the time. I don't know if any of the negotiations talked about the sea level canal and what they were thinking.
Yeah.
But I think they realized that the canal that we know had a limited lifespan
Sure.
because of the Third Locks Canal that we talked about, the other locations, and then a sea level canal. They wanted a sea level canal. It would resolve some of their security issues. It would resolve the size issue,
The whole
and
operation.
they didn't care if we played for the Balboa Rams.
That's so.
You know what's funny too? Sorry. What's funny too is Petro from Colombia was just on the news today saying how the canal is obsolete because of rising sea levels.
Oh well. Okay.
Well, Captain Andrew
reason.
talked about that in the episode last year, and I think he would dispute that. So
Yeah, he said he's only the difference in 30-something years was like 3/8 of an inch.
But then, President. I have here on my notes that Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon all used sea level canal as leverage.
Yeah.
And so I believe that Eisenhower, when he came down, he probably put the bug in their ear that, hey, look, we know you want this canal and you want all these reversions, but we might just pack up and go away.
Yeah. Well, and I after you sent me some of this stuff, I started reading up some other stuff, and it turns out that was a big part of that negotiation. That was the leverage that says, hey, you know what? We can build another canal somewhere else, and we know that the lifespan of your canal is finite,
Right.
and therefore you guys can just blow away in history if you don't play ball with us. And Panama was playing ball. President Robles was playing ball, and then, as we know, fast forward to 1968, there's a military coup, and Torrijos comes in, and so all that stuff is thrown out the window now.
Yeah.
And so that was a big change in those plans.
Yeah. So in 65, President Johnson and President Robles, they were in discussions to replace the 1903
Absolutely.
treaty.
And they had an agreement in general
for a future sea level canal.
Yes.
And then they agreed for site surveys on the new canal. And then, that treaty was never ratified. And in 68, Torrijos came to power.
Yeah. And
So-
that was a whole, he came in with that nationalistic, mindset, the sovereignty mindset. And so, the last thing he wanted to do was engage in a new canal conversation. He's like, wait a minute, let's settle this one. It's going to get you guys the hell out of here first. And then we'll talk about something else.
Yeah. And I've seen all types of, declassified information going back Johnson, Nixon administration,
Yeah.
Henry Kissinger and such. And they basically wrote up the 1979 treaty, without the latest amendments back in 1970.
Right. The framework was already put in place.
Yeah, I would say that 95% of that treaty was written in 1970.
Yeah, I believe it.
And a lot of it was, if you read the Nixon Kissinger stuff, it was, let's get the Panamanians to delay. We can't get this treaty approved because the president's going through an election and all this other stuff. And then Nixon didn't win.
Right. It was all
so
for
it's
nothing.
kind of like the new guy got it. It's like, oh, sorry, we didn't sign that treaty,
Yeah.
but we told the other guy that we would. So, it's.
Well, it was really interesting to see how the canal, even early on after it was finished being built and it was already now in full use and full benefit of the world, they already saw that we need a bigger canal, whether it was militarily or, as we can see, from a economic standpoint and a viability standpoint, which is what we saw over the last 20 years or so with this new canal.
Right.
And
in 1920 or 29, they were saying by 1970 this canal is going to have capacity for like traffic.
Yeah.
They weren't talking about the size of the ships necessarily, but just the amount of ships that needed to use it.
Well, and what's interesting is in 1929 they're saying these things, and they're not factoring in World War II. which
Right.
probably slowed that acceleration down quite a bit because obviously
Yeah.
global
Yeah.
economic shipping went down for probably 10
Yeah.
years.
Well, I mean, there were other factors too. We had the Korean War and we had Vietnam War, and
Sure.
that changed a lot of things as well.
Certainly.
Um,
Certainly.
and I guess the U.S. position on a lot of things about where its assets were and what was concerns, and we had Cuban missile crisis and all that stuff. That none of this stuff can be thought of in a vacuum. There's all these other events going on
Yeah.
that they have to worry about. But the for the Project Plowshare, basically, radiation was the biggest issue
Sure, of course.
that they had to deal with. They couldn't do it, and
And it was correct in that assessment because fast forward in 1986, you have a radiation accident in Chernobyl, and here we are in 2025, and that city's still unlivable.
yeah,
So I mean, you see what radiation can and will do to a region, and I mean, there would be no Panama if you had done that because no matter what those studies showed then, they would have found that it was probably a lot worse than they imagined because you're not talking one nuke. All right, these studies tell you what one nuke does. They're talking
Right.
about setting off a chain of nukes all around the ground in that succession here. So you're talking about a shit ton of radiation being released in that area. Panama's not useful for 500 years. I'm sorry, man, but
and they
it's not.
also they create a bunch of like cracks in the rock, fissures and stuff,
Yep.
and so there's all these other unanticipated events that you have to worry about. And so the next thing we're going to talk about
Great
is
segue there, Dave. Absolutely.
Project 13 or
Mm.
Project 13A, I guess, to be more specific, because Project 13 was, like I said at the beginning, was more of a long-term effort to widen the cut because it was 300 feet wide,
Yep.
and they could only do one ship at a time through the cut. And so they were widening it to 500 feet, and then they put lighting in and those types of things. So there were a lot of capacity improvements there over the years. But what I found is in 1938, one of the engineers found a fissure, a crack in Contractor's Hill, and this crack was 1,000 feet long and 600 feet deep. And in the graphic that you can see there, in the middle, that blue pie shape is a profile of Contractor's Hill. And at the top of the hill, it was this agglomeration of rock. They call it the Pedro McGill Formation, or
Mhm.
agglomeration, and it had a cone shape. It was wider at the top and narrower at the bottom, and then there was this crack that was forming. And so one of the fears was that, heck, the side of this mountain could just shear off and tumble down in the canal and
Right.
block it off. And then how many months is that going to take to clear out? And so they were watching it, and one of the things that they wanted to do with the Contractor's Hill was widen it, and they found this crack, and they hired a company to to remove some of the rock, and then their geologists said that this is too risky, setting off detonations around this thing. So let's just kind of like scrape off the topsoil part and get that out of there, terrace it, and kind of be done with it. So that was the Project 13A. And I don't know if we have the image on the bottom. We showed at the last show, and that one of them has my grandfather. The one on the bottom has my grandfather in this top center. He was working on that project.
That's amazing.
And I didn't know. I didn't know that that's what the reason was. Was there was this crack? You can see the crack in the top left.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I
a
mean,
pretty
that's a
big
good,
crack.
yes, it is. It's a pretty, and it was pretty long. That's just, you can see one piece of it there, but
Yeah,
it had enough.
1,000
Yeah.
feet is the length of the canal lock, and then 600 feet deep is,
Yeah.
that's-
And something interesting as we're going over this, and we're talking about this Culebra cut and the danger of blocking that. right? And so something else that happened in 1968 that we're going to just briefly touch on here, but I definitely want to revisit this in the future because this is a great story here. But in 1968, there was a ship that I guess miscalculated its route there, but it ended up crashing, basically punching a big hole in it, and it sunk in the channel. Okay, and this suddenly, was kind of not necessarily that wake up call, but affirmed that the danger of this, because you have something like that happen here, and there's no room to go around. You have a problem. You have a canal now that has been shut down, and that's the importance of it. But here's what was fascinating about this, and you see the graphic up there on the screen. The ship hit one of the sides. It filled with water. It sunk, and they moved that ship. They managed to pump a bunch of air into it, float it, and move it in 17 hours, which is absolutely incredible, especially if you look back and you think about what happened. What is it, about 4 or 5 years ago? That big giant ship in the Suez Canal that ran aground and blocked the canal. And look at what that did to global commerce simply by shutting down one of the biggest waterways in the world. And certainly you can't, and nobody can argue that the canal's not one of the biggest waterways in the world. And so, it really did reinforce that position that we need some room here, that we need almost a plan B if something happens, because if not, that's a big problem, and middle of the canal, you're not going to get a whole lot of salvage equipment out there. And so it was a testament to the canal zone, to the people that involved in that in a matter of 17, 18 hours, they were able to float that ship up, move it, and then get it repaired and get it underway. So unbelievable.
Yeah. But I thought, and I thought it was interesting that when you read like the canal records and all that stuff, there's not a whole lot of talk about that. You would think that if you have a big old crack like that at Contractors Hill in the narrowest spot of the canal, like the most famous part of it, where those two Osiris steam shovels came together.
That was our promontory point.
Like that, man, it would be catastrophic.
Well, and how many of us visited Contractors Hill and all that and knew that area as a place for observation and everything, and yet there's no signage anywhere that says, hey, this is where the former crack was. I mean, nothing. There was no clue of that.
Yeah. I don't know that the crack went away. I don't know what happened to it. See,
Right.
that's the thing. You can't find anything about it. I could barely find anything about Project 13A and 13.
Right. Yeah. No, it's amazing. It really is. It's funny, these rabbit holes that you go in when you start going through this research and what it pulls out and gives you, and it's fascinating.
So I have a lot more questions than I have answers at this point, but I just wanted to kind of give an overview of the Third Locks project and the sea level canal, because I don't know that, when I heard the word sea level canal, they were talking about sea level canal. I never thought that they were talking about using nuclear bombs to build it.
No kidding, man. God, no kidding.
And like
you
said,
look at that now and you think, are you serious? But they were.
So, but think about what it would happen if they had done that. I mean, the canal zone that we know would have disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right
about what happened, but that wouldn't have been any better.
Nope.
That might have been
would have
worse.
been no Balboa Rams because they didn't come till later on, so we definitely wouldn't have been around. But that is amazing, and yet that was the mindset. Let's go ahead and use nuclear weapons, and I mean, I guess you're a nuclear power, so you figure, what the hell? Let's use nuclear for everything, right? That's who we are. We're America now, and
no, they weren't weapons anymore. They were just nuclear.
They were tools. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And then, of course, as we see on the graphic here, then fast forward past 2000 and things revert back to Panama now, and a big decision is made that now we've all seen, what that's turned out to be.
And they used a lot of that Third Locks work as part of that expansion.
Yeah, makes sense.
So it didn't go unused. It just took 50 years.
Right. Didn't go to waste.
Back.
Yeah,
but,
no kidding.
But obviously, since there was no sea level canal, you needed an option.
Yeah.
And so, they came up with, the best viable option, for them.
Yeah.
And said, why not use what's already been started? I mean, someone was going to build the Third Locks there. And I think, we lost Gatun in that process because they used that to reclaim the water. And that wasn't the proposal in the original one. And which begs the question to me, where was that water going to come from?
Sure. Sure.
You know,
Well, I don't think, at that point they hadn't experienced what we started experiencing later on with these
yeah,
water losses and everything else,
yeah.
and they realized,
But
hey, wait a minute,
yeah,
this
but
stuff is precious,
we don't know about the reservoirs that they were going to build.
right?
So someone might have said, "Hey, it's the water, stupid. We need it. So
Yeah,
we need another Madden Dam that's twice the size
yeah,
because it's twice the volume."
yep,
So I mean, but again, that's where I can't find the information about what they studied and what they were considering. But we took the Madden area, we extended the canal zone for Madden.
sure
We
did.
talked about that, and so it's quite possible that the canal zone could have doubled in size for some reservoir area.
Yeah. Well,
And
I mean, the talk was there. I mean, the talk was there for for
yeah,
70 years before the end of the canal zone.
right.
You
And
know,
now competing. Do you want to take a big reservoir like that away from Panama? They probably didn't want that. So it's like, well, let's recycle the water.
yeah,
And we can make fun of that decision too, but kind of like think of the alternative. Where do you get it? Where do you store it?
yeah.
So,
And now
um,
it's kind of gone full circle, because that's what
so,
they've done here. That was the big piece of this
it's
new one was.
good to be Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, it's much easier, isn't it? Heck yeah. That's awesome.
So
Well, listen, Dave, this was
there's
a
people that
really
are
go
thinking
ahead.
about a lot of these issues and how do you deal with all that? How do you engineer it? How do you do? I mean,
Well,
and
it goes back to what we've learned about the initial, Panama Canal construction. Look at how many times they got it wrong, right? And and
yeah,
and and Stevens comes in and says, "Whoa, whoa, we're not a canal building operation right now. We are a railroad company because we can't move the spoil we're building already." And
right.
so we just completely switch gears. And I mean, you're talking a similar monumental task here, on the second go around, and it took a while to figure it out, to the point that they said, man, this is going to be so much damn work, why don't we nuke this place and see if we can't build it that way. So I
For
mean,
pennies on the
wow.
dollar.
Yeah, no kidding, man.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, absolutely incredible, the
And,
the history that the canal brought and the different directions it could have taken, and
well, how much did this amplification canal cost? 5 billion.
Five, yeah.
thereabouts, yes.
That's what they estimated in the 70s that the sea level canal will cost.
Right. Makes you wonder if wow, that's
The
interesting.
other thing I was thinking of was how much did a Montana class battleship cost? And at the time, it was $137 million for each. They're going to build five of them. So figure $1 billion they're going to spend, or
Right.
$100 million, I guess it was. No,
Half a
it'd
billion.
be, it'd be, it'd be a billion.
Yeah, give or take. At the end of it, I'll be about $1 billion for something that was going to end up now costing you $5 billion to support.
And now we don't use them anymore.
Right.
So it's kind of like they were going to spend $277 million to build a canal and basically a $1 billion for the ship. So they needed, so that's a lot of money. Even the new battleship they're talking about, they're $22 billion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
No,
mean, think about it. That's a lot of
it is.
money.
Well, I mean, if you look at what the United States spends on military, they spend
Yeah, but
more than
still,
the
and
rest of the world.
there's
It's just
a
obscene how much
finite. Again, it's the $250 TNT versus the $7.07
for the
atom.
$6,000 toilet seat
Yeah.
we learned about back in the day. Remember?
Corruption. That's the French way, right?
Yeah. Yes, we learned that for sure, man. So,
Yeah.
wow. Well, this was awesome. Man. It was really interesting to see where the canal could have gone, how they wanted to do this. I still am, and I want to look into this further because I'm dumbfounded that they still wanted a sea level canal after everything they've learned about why it was so difficult to operate, and just again, just from the title standpoint. But
And now we have even with the energy, the atomic thing. Now you start having these environmental impact studies that are needed. That wasn't needed before the '60s.
sure.
And then you
Well,
have
I've read that before that you can't build the Panama Canal today because the environmental impact alone would have stopped it.
yeah, well, I mean, but the environmental impacts aren't something you can just not consider.
Oh yeah, no. I'm just saying it's a different world that we operate in now,
Yeah.
and the hoops that you have to jump through to make things happen nowadays are
Right.
it's incredible, But hey, it is what it is.
Even the
Fortunately for
Nicaraguan
us,
canal that they were talking about, talking about the mixing of the Atlantic and Pacific fish species and stuff going
Correct.
through that. Even though it was 174 miles, it still was going to be able to transport, those
Sure.
different biologies. Um,
Mixed two ecosystems.
yeah. So,
I wonder, like in Chile, right, where the Pacific and Atlantic come together, the waters don't cross each other, and there's like a line that you can see. I wonder if that would have happened in like Gatun or something. One side would be one color, and the other side would be
Interesting.
another. Because right in Chile, the two oceans come together.
Well, it would be interesting when you mentioned that, because I wonder if Lake Gatun, I mean, it is a lake nonetheless, but it's really a widening part of a river, right? And technically is what it is. And so is there a constant, even if it's a small one, but a constant steady current moving from, Gamboa towards Gatun?
well, only when they have Madden Dam open.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, because everything does flow in that direction, though, it seems, from the river and everything else. But anyway, that's for another
But yeah, when just outside of Ocala, one of the Rainbow River, and I can't Ockalochnee River. One of them's crystal clear. The other one is like tannic, and they merge together, and you can see the like black tea on one side and clear on the other.
Yeah, when that Rainbow River comes from a very cold spring, so that I think that plays a role in that as well. But
yeah, you can have that situation happen where the two different waters.
You leave a cruise ship here in Tampa. Once you get out over the continental shelf, I mean, there is a distinct line where the water goes deep blue color. I mean, it is a hard line you see.
There was a man I worked with in South Florida. He told me that when he grew up in Biscayne Bay area of Miami, there was so much hydraulic pressure for fresh water, with all the limestone, the water would seep into the ground and then go underground and then come up, that you could gulp fresh water out in the bay.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible.
Because you had all the fresh water bubbling up.
Sure,
you can find one of these vents.
Wow, that's amazing. That's interesting. Well, and you think about, by the spinning club in there, that area was considered brackish water. You could have some saltwater and freshwater fish in the same area, so interesting. Right on. Well, listen, Dave, thanks again, as usual. A great show, a lot of amazing information, the things that we don't learn in the Canal Zone school system.
And a lot of stuff first time heard in a long time.
Yeah, no, indeed. That whole nuclear thing was just bizarre, man. I mean, that they were serious about that, but that was that time. Remember, I mean, during the 50s and 60s, they were nuclear testing everywhere. They were dropping that shit all over the place. So
yeah, and they were testing for Panama Canal. That's right. The part of it that, when you see these things, like the house and the people in the house and the that like solar wind coming at and blowing it apart. They were testing it to see if they could build a Panama Canal.
Yes, they were. You're right. Even halfway around the world, it was what results those would give us for the Panama Canal.
I didn't know that. They were so.
We've always been at the center of the world, man.
Yeah,
everything.
There's a lot of truth to that. Everything goes through the Panama Canal.
Yeah, all roads lead to the Panama Canal. Right on. Well, what's in store for next month, Dave? What are we thinking?
I don't know. This one wore me out.
This one was a good one, man.
You worked hard on this one. We know how hard you work.
Yeah,
well, maybe our guests can ask us what they like to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll come up with some ideas.
You're right, Ricky. We're about due for a poll, to see what we want to start putting out there. But as usual, it's always very enlightening. It's always very educational. So, Dave, thank you again for taking the time to do this. It's always. And I just realized, we didn't even do Dave's intro. Man. Come on, man. Y'all got to remind me of that stuff, man. Let me see. Hold on here. We got to give him his props here. Hang on. There you go. That's the way. Remind me next time. We got to properly introduce Dave. I mean, he's our longest serving guest, man, and he's got the most appearances. Brings in some amazing information. So apologies for that, Dave. But again, listen, thank you for taking the time to do this. It's a big part of our show that people love to see your what you bring to the table here, man. It's awesome.
I might do something easy like Balboa pool over the centuries.
Oh, that would
right.
be great.
That would be
I would love
cool.
that.
I know that, like they did a documentary with Vincent.
Yes,
a lot of
they
people
sure
know Vincent and stuff like that. But just watching that would be cool. But there's a lot of like images of the Balboa pool, and like I saw one comment the other day. People were like, "That's not Balboa pool," and it's like, "Well, it was. It used to look differently." Another thing that's come up, I've seen through some of these other sites are there's the discussion about the cemetery at Ancon Hill.
Yeah.
So we've talked about it before, but just kind of, I don't want to always go online and correct people, but
you know what's funny? Speaking of that, today somebody posted about the baseball fields. There was a picture taken.
I saw that
aerial somewhere, and he mentioned, and he put together an article on Instagram. Los siete cuadros, the 7 fields. And I messaged him and I said, it's actually 8 fields, because I think the one they missed was, the Little League field was across
Farmer
the street.
League. Yeah, they missed Farmer League.
No. The 2 Farm League fields, they're all clunched together. It was the 2 Little League fields that were split. You had to cross the street. Remember, the other Little League field was back
behind the warehouse.
Yes,
yeah, but that was called Farm League. That other league back there was called Farm. Little League was the one.
No. You had the Pee Wee field, and the 2 Farm League fields were by the train station, and then you had
your
the men's
age
softball
group.
Those were always the fields.
Not my age group. My age group, the Farm League was down by like the side one that there used to be that train pub back there, that train bar.
Okay. So that was Farm League for you guys.
Yeah, for us it was Farm League, and then
So
Little League had two divisions: Mutual of Omaha and then Little League. And Mutual of Omaha would play next to.
This is why we need a baseball show.
Yeah, play behind the softball park.
So when I played it, you had Pee Wee, which was 7 and 8 year olds. You had Farm League 9 and 10, Little League 11 and 12, and then 13 to 15 was Fast League. Kind of like football, almost in that sense. And then from there, of course, you went to high school and whatnot. But
did they show the girls softball field in that?
Yeah, they had that. In other words, they had the 8 field,
it.
but he only called it 7 fields. And I'm thinking that he missed the one on the top because it's, even in the picture, you can see it's kind of far out there, or they may have missed the Fast League because you can hardly see the Fast League. It didn't have a big infield cut into it yet,
So I've always wanted to, like, we've done the old canal towns, and then we did like the construction of Balboa, but doing some of the other towns, like the history of Diablo, we just kind of did tonight in Margarita. But Cardenas or Los Rios or some of these other places that we don't usually talk about. What's their history? There was a whole series in the 50s on the Canal Review that talked about the histories of these towns, and so I would just kind of bring that to life, and then talk about like the Balboa pool or the baseball fields or the skating rinks or something like that, the Red Barn, things that were, even the Tarpon Club or something like, what was the history of these places?
Sure.
Because those aren't a show all by themselves.
Yeah. No, and I think a show on the towns would be great, and start really promote that one, even a couple of weeks out, and what town did you live in? I know last year, the year before, I put out a post one time on Facebook about, and I put up a map of Balboa and a marker on my house on Barnaby Street. And I said, I lived on 747B Barnaby Street. Man, I'll tell you what, I must have gotten 150, 200 responses on that one. People, I lived here. And it seems silly to a non-Zonian, but to Zonians, it's just very fun and nostalgic to show where you lived and what your neighborhood was like and what you remember about it. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that would be a hit for sure, man, because our neighborhoods were a big deal to us, and a big part of the Canal Zone life was that neighborhood, We
didn't talk about it tonight, but one of the things that I saw on a map that Andrew gave me on the Third Locks project in Gatun is part of Gatun was called Silver. Silver Gatun. And when you look on the map, there's no there's no there anymore. Um, I don't know what happened to it. I've never heard of it, but it's labeled, and so was that a local rate town right next
Interesting.
to the gold rate town?
Sure.
And I've heard of Rainbow City, and I've heard of some of these other places. That's why I was thinking, is that where Rod Carew was from? Because
Yeah.
I see he was
I
born
thought
in
he
the
was from
canal zone, he was
Frijoles.
born on the train. His parents worked for the canal, or lived in Cologne, or all these things. Like, I don't know, but maybe that was. And there's a baseball field diamond right there on the edge of the canal next to it. I was like, that would make sense, But I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to. One, I didn't know that place existed, and two, where'd it go? Who lived there?
Sure.
And a lot of these towns, like we talked about, La Boca was a silver town, and then it got reconverted into, in the 50s they rebuilt it. Balboa was, had a bunch of wooden structures, and then that got rebuilt, and the streets got redone in the 50s.
Yeah.
So a lot of these towns,
yeah, the zone went through a lot of different phases, different looks and phases to it. They sure did.
Yeah.
Sure did.
So that could be some of the things I would talk about, how the place, before and afters of how they changed. And, we talked about the police station used to be the cafeteria. And all these things that we never knew that, the housing office.
That in itself, there's still a lot of missing pieces to the history of the Canal Zone Police. Right, because Ricky talks about one of your great uncles or something. Wasn't he a detective for Panama in the zone?
Great grandfather, my mother's grandfather, was one of the back then. They would hire Panamanians to do all the detective work.
Yeah, that's just
so. My great grandfather was one of the first ones to get that to be able to work in both Panama and the Canal Zone.
That's interesting because he superseded your dad then in that sense.
He superseded everybody. He was one of the first liaison officers ever.
Tonight we talked about the hog farm.
Yeah.
But, the motor pool area in Balboa Ancon was called the Corral.
Yes. I've
heard that. Be, when they had the horses.
Correct. Because that was the edge of the swamp.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
So just talking about some of these things, what they were. And someone posted the other day, behind the Balboa post office, a building they thought was located there. It was hard to tell, but it was called the censorship office.
Yes, I saw that. I think it was Mark Sprague that posted that.
And we talked about that early on. I had a drawing that showed an outline of a building, but I've never seen an image of it.
Yeah. Oh, look at Bud Tristano and say Palo Seco would be. That would be a very interesting story.
Yeah, I've done some research on Palo Seco, and
what is that all about? Tell us. Not everybody knows what Palo Seco is.
It's a leper colony.
Oh, I always miss that. I always get that wrong.
I think we may.
And that was right across from the yacht club.
One of our earlier shows, but they had their own community, their own currency. They had like a prom out there. It
was their own community. It really was.
It's
for obvious reasons.
It's interesting and sad at the same time, but that's something that we could
definitely hit on.
It's a great call there, Bud. Absolutely.
I've done the research on that.
Cool.
The military bases is something I want to do. I definitely want to do something on.
Hey, speaking of military bases, I've been corresponding with the guy that was in the Army in the 80s and 90s, but he spent months in the Darien jungle living amongst the tribes there. And so he's going to join us one of these days, and he's got some cool pictures of him, back in the 70s and 80s or 80s and 90s, I guess it was, in the jungles with a lot of these, tribes, and having been stationed in Panama, he loved it so much. He's like, man, I want to stay down here and visit and just trek among these people. So that's going to be an interesting show as well, man.
The jungle school and all those things,
that's another show we need to do is a jungle school, there's a
number of Facebook, people that lived in Clayton, people that lived in Corey, people that lived in,
and they're getting more and more active, it seems, on social media.
That's what I keep on saying. I'd love to see the photos that these people took because, if they're only there for 2 years, they went out and did everything they possibly could in those
Sure.
2 years and took tons of photos.
Yeah. That's what we learned from Bud. That's what he said. He goes, man, Fridays, I'm out, man. Come back in Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
You spend a day out there visiting and experiencing the country, man. You know, it's
So, I definitely want to do a series on the canal towns, but also the military bases, not just the Fort Camp Otis, the stuff that doesn't exist
right.
anymore.
Yeah.
But Clayton and Sherman.
Yeah, I
and
want to do those as well. I
what
couldn't
were they
agree
doing
more.
with Fort Randolph? You know, I mean,
I even, you know, like when Bud was on, it was great to hear his story. Like when he first just arrived in Panama, when he was told, "Hey, you're going to Panama." What was your mindset? You know, we take it for granted. I was born there, so I don't, you know, there was no such Panama. What is that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody that lived in Kansas their whole life, and all of a sudden they're in the military, and you're going to Panama, what is that? Right?
I went to Fort Davis the first time in my life 2 years ago.
Isn't that amazing? And it was right there next to you the whole time.
Actually, I think we played a baseball or football game there one time, but you know, just driving in and getting off the bus and getting on the bus a couple hours, that's not really seeing it. But
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff, you know, that
there's a whole nother end of the Canal Zone experience that we don't even know about.
And I saw a map like you were talking about. Someone had a map of their neighborhood block in Clayton, and like the list of all the people that lived in the other houses were on there.
Yeah, saw that. Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, looking forward to that stuff, man. We got a lot still to cover, which is great. And you know, next month we'll hopefully maybe get some housing stuff. We'll see what it is, or like you said, maybe a short and sweet one on swimming or the pools. We're looking forward to whatever that is. But again, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to join us as usual. You put in a lot of effort into this, and it's always really cool.
And
a lot
showed.
Of great learning.
Thank you so much.
Man. Yeah,
yes.
So
all right.
Definitely have yourself a great rest of your month, and we will talk to you first week in March.
First week in March,
right.
Yes. Right
All
on,
right,
David.
Dave.
Gracias,
Take care,
David.
man. We'll see you.
Right.
All right, man. Hey, that was cool, man. That was,
you know, I really like the end part that we all just chat, because we never chat with David. He just comes in, tells us his history, but we never get to meet. No, Dave. Appreciate that, David.
Yeah, that was good.
And I think the audience really did too, because there was a lot of interaction with David there.
It
at
is,
the
man.
end.
Dave always gets people chiming in, man, because there's a lot of aha moments, you know. And the cool thing is that you talk about these places, and they might have been 70 years ago, but somebody walked those streets, right? And they recognize that, and they add some extra color to it. You know, like Vern chiming in about the Red Barn and all that. So, you know, this what makes the show is you guys helping out and giving your piece of it and your connection as well. So HB, looking forward to that Theater Guild piece. Let's talk maybe this weekend or in a couple of weeks and start putting that one together.
March, right?
You know, and then of course our dictionary and all that stuff. So yeah, a lot of fun, guys. Great stuff here as usual. It's all because of you guys and you're chiming in and just chatting with us. So we're very grateful. But my man the Chiva there is telling me to take it over.
Hand it over. Right on, Mr. Chiva. Hey, guys, thank you again from the bottom of our hearts, Willie and I and David. Really appreciate what you guys do when you join us and participate and make it interactive. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week. We've got a great show for you guys next week. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much.
Salud. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everybody.
All right.